Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'm producing this video about the most underrated watches, because I was prompted by the fact that I was looking around on the internet for various watches that I was just having a look at for friends who were interested, and equally for the fact that I'm saving up for my next large buy, and I was just seeing what was on the market really. And I was rather baffled by how low prices for certain watches which I've known and tried on and seen are fantastic quality. I've seen them at such low prices, which surprised me, and having done a bit more research into these particular watches with regards to the views held towards them, I was interested to talk about these watches because they really do offer a remarkable drop in price from new to used, and I believe this is because they're very much underrated considering the features that they offer. Now this first watch which I'll be talking about is the Certina DS Action Diver, and this is the automatic version. And this watch is an interesting one because whereas a lot of brands around this price point battle it out, if you will, notably Steinhardt and Squale, with regards to the specification of their watches and so on, and equally Seiko, which tend to really take the biscuit, so to speak. But a brand which is rarely mentioned in the face of these other companies is Certina, and it's an interesting one because fundamentally, Certina are a very, historic brand from 1888, who produce really quite tremendous watches, in my opinion, with features which, on the face of things, may not seem as impressive as others. For example, their water resistance is only 200 metres, to the 500, which is available in some Squale, or the 600 of some Christopher Wards. However, I believe these watches excel in other ways. Now, the reason why I think that the DS Action Diver is so tremendous value and so underrated compared to other divers around this price point is the fact that it fits in with the ISO 6425 certification to make this watch a true dive watch in the true terms. So this watch has the particular specifications required, notably hands which can be quickly and easily told from each other, a high certain level of anti-magnetism, and a certified water resistance for an extended period of time, which a lot of brands don't test. They merely test the depth rating briefly. Equally, these watches come with ETA 2824s, which are gradually becoming more and more expensive for brands to put into their watches, yet Certina are keeping their prices quite low, actually, and in my opinion are actually a competition to Steinhardt with regards to value, which a lot of brands can't compete with. Notably, Christopher Ward's prices have gone up recently, by contrast to Certina's, which have remained around the £500 mark in the face of this. Equally, this is a brand which doesn't make derivative watches. The DS Action, for example, is very individual in its design, and doesn't really resemble any other watches. It may take hints from other watches, but very much has its own appeal, which is something really to be respected in this world of homage watches. Also, with regards to, for example, its bracelet, they really have considered diving, where a lot of other watches around this price point haven't. So a lot of dive watches don't have dive extensions, whereas here, for the £500 asking price, they do. However, the version of this watch which I believe is the best value of all is the titanium version. Now this version comes in this sunburst grey style dial to match that slightly darker shade of case. But they really have done something which a lot of brands around this price point aren't able to, which is matching the titanium colour all over. Now we've noticed this on various Steinhardt's, various examples of the Steinhardt Ocean 500. Now personally in my case it didn't particularly bother me, but a lot of people were bothered by this, and this has been seen on a lot of other titanium dive watches. And really the only ones which had matching bracelets were the Tudor Pelagos and other watches around that price point. Whereas here Certina are making a watch which matches pretty much all the time, perfectly, out of titanium, for the price of £600, which I think is pretty remarkable. Also, considering how corrosion-resistant titanium is due to its oxide layer on its surface, this does make the watch really perfect for diving and furthers that pedigree in terms of dive specification that is confirmed by the ISO certification these watches undergo. Now, this is why I think that Certina are a brand which is overlooked, really, by a lot of people who are looking for example, a dive watch around the £500 price mark, whereas a lot of people will go to Christopher Ward, Squale, Steinhardt. Here, Certina, I believe, offer a really fantastic product, which is often neglected, really, and isn't really seen for being the very professional dive watch, which it really is. Now, the next few watches all come under the Oris Big Crown Propilot range, and this is a range of watches which, I suppose, for Oris is the Tudor North flag to the Tudor Pelagos. It's the other modern sports watch for which contrasts the Aquis as the Pilot range, or the alternative range to the main dive watch in the Oris range. However, the finishing on this watch is truly tremendous. I've handled this watch several times, and the finishing of the brushed surfaces on this watch really do lend to a very modern yet traditional style, which I believe is extremely versatile and very attractive. Now, directly from the factory, these watches cost approximately £1,000 and up, depending on the model. However, I've seen recently some of these watches discounted in shops brand new, unused in real dealerships, down to about £600. Now, this is quite remarkable for a watch of this calibre, with again a Sellita movement and really fantastic features, but equally beautiful finishing from Oris. Now, my hypothesis as to why this is the case is because these watches play second fiddle to the dive watch ranges offered by Oris. Oris offer, of course, the Aquis and the Diver 65, which really have taken the market by storm, which have sort of left behind the Propilot range and resulted in these very, very well-priced models. Now, two versions which I would have thought would have had more success, but yet seem to be some of the best discounted versions, simply due to the fact that they haven't been received with the same interest as the Oris Aquis, for example. These versions are the standard version, the standard date version, the day date, and the small seconds. These all use Sellita movements, yet still have this beautifully finished case with this knurling around the bezel and the case back. They also all share that beautiful strap with leather and nylon, with that fantastic clasp. Equally, the finishing of these watches is made all the more attractive by the fact that their cases are, like the Aquis, bead blasted very finely, and then brushed to give a very soft brushing that looks extremely high in terms of quality. Of course, these watches are also very versatile in that they offer 100 metres of water resistance, offering sort of a field watch as well as an aviation watch, really making this watch all the more versatile. Equally, the small seconds version does also feature a GMT function, which is extremely useful for most people, even if they're not pilots, for general travellers or people who happen to work in several time zones, thus making this watch very practical, and all the more surprising that it isn't more popular. However, the watch which I think is the most underrated in terms of being an impressive timepiece and one worth spending money on is the Big Crown Propilot with the power reserve and the in-house movement. This version offers a far more dressy and altogether more luxury-based watch, but that still retains the legibility of the original, but now has a multi-layered dial with this beautiful sunburst effect, and also raised numerals and again those high visibility hands. These watches also have that power reserve indicator, which is non-linear, so it broadens out as it reaches at the bottom of its power reserve, which is a very interesting complication and definitely one to be admired. However, the fact that this watch has been reduced to such an extent, I find absolutely incredible. These watches are standard retail at £3,800, but I've seen brand new in shops for £2,300. Equally, this 40 dual movement has a 10-day power reserve, which is unbelievably long, and much longer than the majority of watches out there. In fact, this is, frankly, for the price, the longest power reserve I've ever seen, which I find really very impressive, considering the reduction in, of course, the price of this watch. Of course, one doesn't get the Oris red rotor because this is manually wound, but with 10 days of power reserve, frankly, I doubt that anyone will regret not having an automatic movement. It also does retain all the practicalities of the standard version, with the addition of that extra complication. Now this next watch is one which is very close to my heart, in that it resembles military aviation watches of the past, and this is the Sinn 103. Now the Sinn 103 is a sort of a step up from the 104, which has achieved a great deal of fame at its price of about £1,000, due to its countdown bezel and sheer simplicity and the fact that it harks back to days of aviation watches. However, here one sees a far more complicated timepiece, with a great deal of extra additions and functions over that watch, which I believe is a truly fantastic package for the price, and one which isn't recognised that well. Now, I picked this watch because Sinn's range is already fantastic value in terms of what one gets in terms of quality, but this watch, I believe, is a model which has been neglected, I suppose, and not really seen by a lot of buyers who would rather go for a 356 or a 358, for example, when this watch, I believe, actually offers more functionality for less money. Now, coming in at £1,400, this watch has a Swiss automatic chronograph movement. It's water resistant to 300 metres, with a bidirectional bezel, which is a countdown bezel, plus the chronograph function and the day and the date. It's all equally wrapped in this package, which is a vintage military pilot's watch design, very similar to the specification that Breguet Type 20s were produced to, but offering a more modern and more technically advanced design. Now, the reason why this watch in particular got onto the video, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the fact that Sinn has priced a lot of its other watches much higher than this, which offer, on the face of things, less features, notably the 356 and the 358 lines, which are lines which I adore and think are very elegant watches for the price, which offer fantastic features. But I believe that this watch offers a great deal more, with its 300 metres of water resistance, loomed dial, which is extensively loomed, chronograph functions, and the countdown bezel, in that tegmented black finish to give a more military and more unified theme on the front of the watch. Equally, this is a watch which I've very, very rarely seen. I've seen a great deal of Sinns on people's wrists, mostly U-line watches, but equally 356, models, 104s, Navi timers, and so on. But I've never seen a 104 on someone, 103, sorry, on someone's wrist, which I find remarkable, really, considering the features of this watch. And this is why this watch definitely deserves a place on this list of underrated wristwatches. Now, the final watch in this video is a really very unlikely one. Now, the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe is often seen as a high luxury timepiece, which is very popular, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a fantastic watch with a great deal of features. But I believe that recently, actually, this watch has become greatly underrated in terms of the misconceptions with regards to how much this watch actually costs. So, a lot of people are dissuaded from buying from Blancpain with regards to the Bathyscaphe because they look at the retail price and understandably are shocked at the fact that this watch comes in around £9,000 or £10,000, even £11,000, which is a great deal. However, what one doesn't notice is that actually, as these new ceramic versions have come in, the steel models have really taken a back seat in terms of pricing, and now one can get them brand new from a dealership for £5,000 to £6,000. Now, in my opinion, this is really very impressive, because these watches offer tremendous design, beautiful finishing, spectacular finishing on the dial, especially with regards to the white gold indices, white gold hands, and then that sunburst effect dial, with the date moved to 4:30 for discretion purposes. And I believe with its 300 metres of water resistance directly competes with the Rolex Submariner. And of course Rolex have upped their prices recently, leaving this watch really in a position where actually it's fantastic value. However, some people would argue that Rolex offer their 904L stainless steel, which is superior to Blancpain stainless steel. And that's true, but for £6,000 to £7,000, about £6,500, one can get a brand new titanium version. And I don't mean unworn, I mean brand new from a dealership, with warranty and everything. So it really is impressive what one can get with regards to the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. And it's bizarre why this watch is often discounted from people's purchase lists, if you will, because this watch is seen to be more expensive than it actually can be. which leads to this misconception. Of course, this watch is also a 300-metre dive watch, and in the long run is much rarer than a Rolex Submariner. But equally, it has the sapphire case back and the fully decorated in-house movement. Now, though it may be decorated in sort of a Spartan way, it has been very carefully polished and finished and decorated, despite the fact that it is decorated in something that one wouldn't call ornate in terms of the fashion. It is visible and does offer an insight into what's going on inside your wristwatch. Equally, one cannot belittle the fact that this watch is the grandchild of the first dive watch ever created. Now, some would argue that the Omega Marine was a watch which acted as a dive watch, but in my opinion, the first dive watch was the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. And the Bathyscaphe here really does hark back to those days, and in my opinion offers a really incredible history and a very different watch, and possibly a more interesting one than the Rolex Submariner in some ways. Now, in a different way, whereas the Blancpain is underrated because people overestimate the price the watch costs and therefore don't buy it, because they see it as bad value, the Omega Constellation, that's the Genta-designed version, has become underrated in terms of price as a result of it being underrated for different aspects, possibly its design. Now, this last watch on the list is of course the Omega Constellation, and the one designed by Gerald Genta. Now, this watch is iconic in that it was designed by the same person who designed the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus, resulting in a watch which has that typical style of integrated bracelet, but takes Omega's style and adds it to this Genta flair. Now, I believe the reason why this watch has made it onto this list is because it has such a low resale value. Now, these watches are iconic really due to their design, but I think they attract some people while a lot of people find the design unattractive, simply due to the fact that it is an acquired taste. That said, though, this watch, offering an in-house Omega movement, a coaxial chronometer movement, either with the day or the day and date, either with the date or the day-date complication, these watches will sell as new for between £2,500 and £5,000 in steel, and then off into space for the more expensive precious metal versions. However, the steel version, for example, can be acquired in full size for between £1,000 and £1,500 with the coaxial chronometer movement on the second-hand market, which is an incredible depreciation for a watch which should be iconic. Now, this watch is also quite close to my heart because my grandmother wears a two-tone version, a quartz two-tone model, and it's been used for years, and it still looks as timeless as it did originally. I imagine I wasn't around when she first bought it, but nonetheless, it's a beautiful piece, and very, very different to anything else on the market. But recently, people haven't been buying these watches, and I don't really understand why. I assume it's the design, which puts various people off, but I do think this is just a fantastically underrated watch, considering the features it offers. It also even has a higher water resistance, for example, than the AP Royal Oak at 100 metres, so one could realistically use this as a combination sport and dress watch. Equally, that typical bracelet designed by Genta, typical of Genta's designs, where it's integrated into the watch, offers a very interesting look to this watch, and does give a very distinctive feel to this watch. It's a very slim watch, but the bracelet does make it very elegant in the way it hugs the wrist and sits on the wrist, and does, I believe, make it go with pretty much anything due to its neutral colouring on that transverse brushing on the bracelet. Anyway, that concludes this video as, in my opinion, the most underrated watch on the market today. So thank you very much for watching, and please do give me your views and what you think of these watches, and also what you would consider better choices for the list, or just simply other choices for the list, because I really am interested. So thank you very much for watching. Do please like, share and subscribe if you did enjoy this video, to see more content on this channel and support the channel. So thank you very much for watching. This is I'm on the Watch Guy, over and out.